Tonight on Reporting Scotland, one of the richest men in the world versus the former First Minister. A long-running feud on social media ramps up again as Elon Musk dares Hamza Yussef to go ahead and sue after he calls him racist. This week's bin strikes are off as all three council unions suspend industrial action to consider an improved pay offer. Also on tonight's programme, a lucky escape in Aviemore. 2 children and an adult are unhurt after their home was struck by lightning. A frightening moment too for neighbours.
Both my wife and I actually got the effects of the lightning strike through our feet. We didn't know the house had been hit until a few minutes later when we could smell the smoke, and we both came out and had a look, and the house was quite alight.
Coming up in the sport, Rangers goalkeeper Jack Butland insists the Ibrox side can match his ambitions as they prepare for a crucial Champions League qualifier. And 40 years since their debut at the Fringe, comedy duo Victor and Barry come full circle to launch a memoir. Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Monday's programme. One is the former First Minister of Scotland. The other is one of the richest people on the planet. And the pair are locked in an increasingly bitter war of words, which has now escalated to threats of legal action. Elon Musk has dared Hamza Yussef to go ahead and sue him after the chief executive of Tesla and owner of social media platform X branded the SNP MSP super racist against white people. Our political correspondent Andrew Kerr has the story.
It was at a Fringe event in Edinburgh on Thursday when Hamza Yussef reignited his feud with the tech billionaire Elon Musk. With riots and disorder down south and in Northern Ireland, the former First Minister had been appalled at what he saw as a whipping up of right-wing activity from the owner of the social media site X.
Who, I have to say, in my opinion, is one of the most dangerous men on the planet. He is not accountable to anybody. He has vast wealth at his fingertips and disposal, and he uses it for some of the most wicked evil I've seen.
The two men have history and clashed on race in October. As the Fringe comments were repeated on X, Elon Musk responded to a selectively edited video of Hamza Yussef speaking in Parliament in 2020, calling him super racist. Yesterday, Mr. Yussef called him a dangerous race baiter and reportedly threatened legal action. The billionaire bit back, daring the former party leader to sue him. The BBC have asked to speak to Elon Musk but received no response. Hamza Yussef declined to comment today. On a visit to Glasgow, the First Minister was asked if the SNP or the government could provide financial support to Mr. Yussef in any legal case. John Swinney said that was a question for him and added this.
I want to make sure that we have a civilised discourse, and the way that Elon Musk has talked about Hamza Yussef is just completely and utterly unacceptable. And I made clear last week my concern that social media companies, and Elon Musk obviously owns a social media company, are not being held to account for the behaviour that is essentially being played out on their networks.
The company, formerly known as Twitter, has changed considerably since Elon Musk bought it.
He is singing and preaching to his audience of people that seem to be highly geared towards far-right rhetoric and ideologies. I think he enjoys the dopamine hit of people sort of cheering him on and him being the ringleader of all of this sort of activity. I myself described him last week as a bit like a PR manager for the far-right with some of the views that he chooses to amplify.
It will be hard for governments around the globe to hold the richest man in the world to account. Tonight, Elon Musk will interview US presidential candidate Donald Trump. Both men may have more to say on this latest row. Andrew Kerr, Reporting Scotland.
So the strikes are off. The rubbish won't be piling high and the bin workers won't be going out on strike. It comes after a late pay offer was made by councils, which the three unions involved are now putting to their members. With more on this, here's our news correspondent Jamie McIver.
This was Glasgow during the last bin strike 2 years ago. Now the threat of a repeat from Wednesday has been lifted, and tonight many will be breathing a huge sigh of relief.
All the cups were all full all over the bins. It's just not a good look for Glasgow, that, so I'm awful glad it's been called off.
Seagulls would feed on it, birds would feed on it, it just was an absolute mess.
Well, that's fantastic that it's been cancelled because people will get their bins collected, won't they?
This is what the new pay offer means for council workers. A 3.6% rise for most, with the lowest paid getting more, almost £1,300 a year. All three unions have suspended the planned bin strike, so there's no chance of more scenes like these this month. But there are differing views on whether the latest offer is the best one possible. Two unions are sounding positive.
Every worker will receive at least a 67p an hour pay rise. That means it really protects those people delivering the frontline services, so your cleaners, your caterers, your bin lorry loaders and your street cleaners.
Our committee, after a lot of deliberations on this offer, have decided to suspend industrial action from this Wednesday. We will now consult with our membership and we will recommend acceptance of this deal.
But the third union says the pay row is far from over. Unison has also suspended its planned action, but it's urging members to reject the offer.
Over the past 14 years, we have seen the level of our wages fall by 25%. So increasing it by kind of 3.6% isn't going to rectify that.
Councils say there's simply no more money for pay this year.
The pay offer that's on the table is pushing the affordability for local government to its very limits. The additional money that has been put into the offer has come from Scottish Government. There is simply no further funding available in Scottish local government.
What happens next depends on how union members vote over the next few weeks. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.
A family in the Highlands managed to escape from their burning house this morning after it was set on fire in a lightning strike. The incident occurred in Aviemore during thunderstorms earlier. Ailey Davis reports.
The torrential rain and thunderstorms caused lightning strikes like this to hit a house in Aviemore with devastating consequences.
I was actually stood in the doorway of the house when the lightning strike occurred, and both my wife and I actually got the effects of the lightning strike through our feet. And I said that's 100 yards away, and there were a few other people around as well. So the actual effect for us wasn't just seeing a bit of thunder and lightning. And obviously with the house, we didn't know the house had been hit until a few minutes later when we could smell the smoke, and we both came out and had a look, and the house was quite alight by then.
Several Scottish fire and rescue teams as well as a high lift appliance rushed to the scene.
It is unusual. Thankfully these things don't happen very often. We have had reports of significant thunderstorms, and it's just the nature of the type of incidents that we're responding to now. But again, our crews are always ready to respond, but for forecasting for lightning and things like that, very, very difficult to predict. The occupants were in the building at the time, and thankfully have managed to get out. So the whole family is safe and well. All the persons are accounted for.
The Met Office yellow thunderstorm warning has now passed, but of the 12,000 lightning strikes across the country in the last 24 hours, the strike in Aviemore appears to have been one of the worst. Ailey Davis, reporting Scotland.
An inquiry into the death of a 3-year-old boy in Edinburgh 4 years ago began today. Xander Irvin was killed when he was hit by a car in June 2020. The proceedings opened with a minute's silence in memory of Xander, as Cameron Butler reports.
As the inquiry stood for a minute's silence, Xander Irvin's parents, Paul and Victoria, cried and comforted each other. The inquiry heard that Xander was 3 years old when he was killed after being hit by a car while out walking with his mother in June 2020.
The driver of the car was 91-year-old Edith Duncan. She wasn't injured in the accident, but died nearly a year later. The inquiry heard that Miss Duncan had cancelled her car insurance earlier in the year as she didn't want to pay out the money as she felt she didn't use her car enough. Miss Duncan's driving licence had been renewed in 2020, and there was no notification of any condition that would have affected her ability to drive. On the day of the accident, she had been parked illegally on a Pelican crossing. When she tried to do a U-turn, the inquiry was told she completely lost control of the car, saying she thought her foot had slipped onto the accelerator.
Xander's parents asked to leave the court when dashcam footage of the accident was played to the inquiry. The footage showed Miss Duncan's red Kia car accelerating quickly across the road and hitting the wall. The silent footage showed people running to help.
One of the people who did try to help that day was Claire Kavanagh, who was working nearby. She helped Edith Duncan out of the car. She said Miss Duncan clearly didn't know what had happened and kept repeating that she had new shoes and they had slipped on the car pedals.
Thousands of people lined the streets for the funeral of Xander. At the time, the family released a statement describing him as a happy, bubbly, intelligent little boy who was dearly loved. The inquiry continues. Cameron Buttle reporting Scotland, Edinburgh Sheriff Court.
Scotland has become the first part of the UK to introduce an NHS vaccine programme against the respiratory virus RSV. The JAGs for women in the later stages of pregnancy and people in their late 70s are aimed at preventing what can be a severe illness for some. Our reporter Phil McDonald has more.
Smiley boy.
Leo Smith is a happy, healthy 2-year-old. But when he was just 3 weeks old, he became unwell after catching RSV.
Good.
The doctors told me that he would be at his worst between days 3 and 5. They said that's when his breathing would be very difficult. He would need help with, they have to do suction to remove all the secretions. So there's not a cure, they just have to manage the symptoms.
Leo spent days in hospital struggling to breathe. RSV is a common and highly infectious virus which affects the respiratory system. It generally causes mild symptoms, but it can lead to severe illness in babies and the elderly.
I would do all-nighters in the hospital because he was a newborn and he didn't really have any kind of schedule and he was very unwell. So we were exhausted, emotional. I found the time to be extremely emotional.
The Scottish Government has invested more than £4 million in the supply of new RSV jabs. They're being offered to pregnant women and those aged between 75 and 79.
For some people, it could get serious, causes lower respiratory tract infections such as pneumonia, bronchiolitis, which is a small airways inflammation, and it causes shortage of breathing.
You saying hi?
Scotland is the first of the 4 UK nations to administer the vaccines. Ailey says she would not have hesitated in taking it if it had been available to her.
I would jump at the chance if I was in that position again. It was such a difficult thing to go through. If you can avoid going through that, then I would do anything I could.
Phil McDonald reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
Disabled islanders are raising concerns about access on Orkney's inter-island ferries. Most of the country's fleets was built in the early 1990s, before disability access laws were implemented. The Scottish Government has agreed in principle to fund a business case for new vessels. Our reporter Ian Hamilton has the story.
Orkney's inter-island ferries are a vital lifeline for these communities. But for disabled passengers,
wouldn't like to do that in a wheelchair.
They can be a daunting challenge.
Which way? Step down. Oh wow, okay, yeah.
For a blind person like me, getting around these ferries feels more like an obstacle course.
There's a handrail on your left, so I'm going to go up in front of you.
Steep staircases are more like ladders given their gradient. For anyone with serious mobility problems, they're impossible. And there's no lift alternative. A 90-minute ferry trip from Kirkwall is the island of Westray.
There we go.
I met up with Anne Kent and her mother Myra. Anne has multiple sclerosis.
I can't walk and I can't head on to anything. So it kind of restricts a lot.
Because of a cramped car deck, Anne cannot get out of her vehicle in her wheelchair.
Summertime is not so bad. Wintertime, unless you go with hot water bottles and blankets, you're very cold by the time you get to the Toon.
These ferries were built before disability legislation was agreed and before modern disability access standards were approved. The big questions are, who's going to pay for the new ferries and how long is it going to take?
The ferries replacement is going to cost in the region of hundreds of millions of pounds. To put that in context a little bit, the annual budget for Orkney Arms Council is about 100 million, and that delivers all of our services, education, social care, waste, everything in a year. So we think about that context for Scotland's smallest local authority. This is a huge bill.
Orkney Islands Council has been working with the Scottish Government to find a solution and have created a task force with the aim of replacing the fleet. Transport Scotland have agreed in principle to fund a business case for new ferries. If the Scottish Government agree to pay for a new fleet, it could still take years to build it. Ian Hamilton, reporting Scotland, Orkney.
Well, now Amy's here with the sport. The Olympics are over, but we've plenty more sport to talk about.
Exactly, we'll never be short of that, will we, Laura? Thanks very much. Hello there. On the eve of their Champions League qualifier, Jack Butland has revealed that one-to-one talks with senior figures at Rangers have left him feeling positive about the future of the club. The Ibrox side face Dynamo Kyiv at Hampden tomorrow in the second leg of their qualifier after picking up their first 3 points of the season at the weekend in this 2-1 win against Motherwell. Keeper Butland, who was subject to transfer speculation during the summer, says he wants to bring success to the club and is aiming for the top tier of European football.
We're not comfortable with the Europa League. Yes, it's a great competition if you are in there, and there's a great opportunity to progress and things like that, but we want to test ourselves, what it does for the club, just in the outside world, just in general for players to experience that, the financial gain for the club. It's an important thing. That's not something that we think of as players, it's just a reality. So, my conversations with the club are, what we're doing, where we going, how far are we going, and how far are we pushing, which is, as any player at the club, is what you want to know. You want to know the ambitions. It's a concern of mine. I'm not concerned, but it's a concern. It's good to speak to those people. It's good to know where the club's at and the direction and the optimism and things like that. As a player, there's certainly things that you want to know and be a part of. I hope my opinions sometimes are taken and mattered as well. And it's a good relationship, and thoroughly enjoy how things are going.
Aberdeen are set for a huge cash windfall from the sale of striker Bojan Miovski, with the Pittodrie side in negotiations with Spanish club Girona, but other clubs remain keen still on the 25-year-old. The North Macedonian has caught the eye since arriving in the Premiership 2 years ago. These were the scenes after the Dons beat St Mirren yesterday. Miovski looked quite emotional as his teammates pushed him to the fans for what looked like a farewell. The home side maintained their winning start to the league campaign with a 3-1 win. Vicente Bezoan putting the result beyond doubt in the final 10 minutes. Aberdeen aren't the only side to start the Premiership with a 100% record. Defending champions Celtic are picking up where they left off from last season with their second straight victory, this time away to Hibernian. Nicholas Kuhn opened the scoring at Easter Road before Callum McGregor, who has just announced his international retirement, reminded fans why Scotland's loss could be Celtic's gain. What a strike that one was. Manager Brendan Rodgers was satisfied with his team's work, but wouldn't be drawn on repeated speculation linking the Parkhead club with a permanent move for Norwich City striker Adam Ida.
I don't know. I don't want to speak. Listen, I have to respect Adam's a Norwich player, and I'm not going to go in too much about other clubs' players. Like you say, he came on yesterday for Norwich. So my focus is now in this moment, making sure we prepare the team. The team are doing very, very well, playing well, and 2 wins out of 2 is a really good start for us.
It was a high-scoring opening weekend in the Scottish Women's Premier League, with both Rangers and Hearts hitting double digits in their games, while reigning champions Celtic put 9 past Dundee United. Last season's runners-up Rangers are top of the table after a huge 11-0 win over Aberdeen. There were 3 dream debuts in the Hearts side, who punished the league's newcomers Queen's Park 11-1. Sophia Mata managed a hat-trick in her first game for Glasgow City. They won 7-0 away to Montrose, and there were also victories for Motherwell and Hibs against Spartans and Partick Thistle. Yes, goals galore in the SWPL, Laura, and you can see those goals on the highlights programme on the BBC Scotland channel from 7 o'clock tonight.
Take them a while to get through all of those, won't it? You're too young to remember this next story, but you can enjoy it afresh,
yes,
so stay with us. Yeah, because it is 40 years since this young comic duo made their debut at the Edinburgh Fringe as the double act, Victor and Barry, of course. Since then, both Alan Cumming and Forbes Masson have gone on to have successful individual careers in TV, film and theatre. Well, now they're returning to character and reuniting at the festival to launch a memoir. And they've been talking to our arts correspondent, Pauline McLean.
The pubs are busy, the town's in a tizzy, the weather is hot.
Alan Cumming and Forbes Masson were teenagers in drama college when they first created Victor and Barry, a cabaret show which went on to become a huge hit, not just at the festival, but on TV and radio. 40 years later, having gone their separate ways in successful solo careers, Forbes and Alan have reunited as Victor and Barry to launch a book. And they're far from forgotten.
I just definitely think there's something that people relate to in Forbes and I and in these characters, is that we were just two boys that gave it a go. And, you know, and didn't sort of, and kind of against the, you know, when we were at drama school and when we started doing Victor Barry, our Scottishness was kind of seen as a negative thing. It was kind of seen as a problem we might have to overcome. And we actually just refused to buy into that, and it became, you know, in these instances, the very best thing about us.
That can be Philby, and that can be Burgess.
And coming back together has revived interest in another of their cult comedy creations, The High Life.
They're Victor and Barry on a plane, really.
Yeah.
Without the cravats.
Yeah,
but with
sort of a slightly more real world.
And musical as well. I mean, The High Life was always, the opening titles were so musical and there's so much music in it.
Yeah, actually there are several songs in the show.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. And the Eurovision Song Contest entry,
yeah,
of course, might be seeing that again in the musical.
They're currently working on a stage musical with the National Theatre of Scotland, and the BBC is about to re-release the TV show. So Steve and Sebastian may be back, but is it goodbye Victor and Barry?
Yeah, but Pauline, look at us here. Never say never.
Never say never.
You know?
You never know. I just don't have enough hair for the Kiss Girl anymore. It's moved down here.
Seriously, when we contemplated dressing up as them, that was the main reason he didn't want to do it. He didn't have any hair for the Kiss Girl.
Hair.
Bye back, Caledonia! Edinburgh Festival in the city east of Falkirk and Glasgow. Thank you.
OK, now Callum is here with the weather. It was the hottest day of the year in some parts of the UK, but different story here.
Down south, yes. Crash, bang, wallop. We had these intense thunderstorms working their way north-eastwards. In fact, in the past 24 hours, we've actually had 15,000 lightning discharges across the UK. Yeah. So, yeah, we were active thunderstorms, weren't they just? Yes, we had an early alarm call for many of us as the atmosphere went crash, bang, wallop as these bands of thunderstorms worked their way north-eastwards. But behind them, it did brighten up. But we did have some blowy old conditions up there in the northwest. That was the ferry arriving into Stornoway Harbour. That's the earlier radar and lightning. You can see the frequent lightning, torrential downpours on those thundery bands. Behind it, we had a wee bit drizzle, and then it brightened up. And we're currently between two weather systems here. Not too bad in the evening, but tonight we'll see this secondary low work its way into the west coast, strengthening the southerly winds once more with some rain, which will spread eastwards through the course of tomorrow. But this evening, some spells of sunshine. The thundery plume is departing Shetland as we speak to the east. And then overnight, generally we'll have largely clear conditions, although cloud will thicken in the west and lows of 10 to 14 degrees Celsius. It'll be warmest up the west coast, where those southerly winds will ramp up once more by the end of the night with some rain and drizzle, which will work its way into the west. Best of the early sunshine tomorrow in the east and northeast, but even for you, it will cloud over with some spells of rain and drizzle working their way in. But they will tend to turn more showery downwind of the hills in the east and northeast. And then in the afternoon, slowly but surely, we'll see something brighter feed in on gusty, increasingly strong southwesterly winds. Temperatures around 17 to 19 degrees. Again, downwind of the hills, we could squeeze 20, 21. The wraparound frontal zone will work its way around the centre of low pressure back into parts of the West Highland sky, and a core of gales working their way into the Western Isles, which will then transfer into the Northern Isles tomorrow evening and then gradually ease into the night. Elsewhere, the winds will ease down. It'll turn mostly dry, and that's because ahead of this ridge of high pressure, which will move in for Wednesday, which will be our best day of the week, but knocking in the door, more rain-bearing weather fronts in the northwest. So on Wednesday, we'll have a southwesterly breeze, some areas of cloud at times in the west, but some spells of sunshine, best in the south and east. Temperatures up to around 18 to 21 degrees Celsius, but strengthening winds and rain back into the northwest later. That's you up to date on the weather front. Laura.
Thank you, Callum.
Thanks.
Now tonight's big news again. An online war of words between the former First Minister Hamza Yussef and the owner of the X social media platform Elon Musk has escalated to threats of legal action. And that is Reporting Scotland. I'll have your late news around 10:30 tonight. Join me then if you can. In the meantime, from all of us here, good night.